So with the counted loop, we specify exactly how many times the action is going to be repeated. So for example, we're assigning to a variable n the value of 5, and we're saying repeat n times. So in other words, repeat 5 times the action of the loop. In many cases, the way that you create a counted loop is to use what is called a loop or an iterator variable. Frequently, we call the iterator variable I. So we might say that our iterator variable I is going to go through the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in that sequence. And what we're going to say is that we're going to repeat the loop for every value of I. So when I has a value 1, we execute the statements in the action. When I has a value 2, we execute the statements in the action. When I has a value 3, we execute the statements in the action. When I has a value 4, we execute the statements in the action. And then when I has a value 5, we execute the statements in the action. Sometimes the value of the iterator variable is actually used in the action, but sometimes it's just a way of specifying how many times the action is going to be repeated. So for this case, 5. So here's an example of using the iterator variable in the action. So we're going to say that I is going to go through all of the values from 1 to 5, and the loop says repeat for every value of I, print the value of I. So the output is going to look like this. Now it's going to depend on whether we have a new line in the printing or not. But let's say when I has a value 1, we print 1. When I has the value 2, we print 2. When I has the value 3, we print 3. When I has a value 4, we print 4. And when I has a value 5, we print 5. So in this case, when we're printing the value of I, we're going to see each value of I as the action of the loop is executed, in this case to print the value of I. And sometimes the iterator variable is not used in the loop. It's just used as a way of saying how many times we're going to repeat the action. So in this case, I'm saying that I is going to go through the values 1 and then 2 and then 3. And the loop says we're going to repeat for every value of I the action of printing hello. So when I has the value 1, we're going to print hello. When I has a value 2, we're going to print hello. And again, this might be if I printed a new line character as well. If I has the value 3, we're going to print hello. So in this case, we're just saying we're going to repeat the action of printing hello 3 times by specifying that I is going to go through the values 1, then 2, then 3. Now, one application of a counted loop is to calculate what's called a running sum. So in this case, we say that our loop or iterator variable I is going to go through all of the values from 1 to 5. So let's actually keep track of the values of I. And we're also going to have a variable sum, and I'm going to start that by initializing sum to have the value 0. All right, so I gets its first value 1. We're going to repeat for every value of I. So right now we're saying assign to the variable sum the value of sum plus I. So 0 plus 1 is 1. We're going to store that in sum. So sum now has the value 1. Then I gets its next value 2. So now I has the value 2. And we're going to say sum gets the value of sum plus I. So now sum is 1, I is 2. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And we're storing that value in sum. Then I gets its next value 3. Sum gets the value sum plus I. So 3 plus 3 is 6. Then I gets the value 4. Sum gets the value of sum plus I, 6 plus 4, or 10. Then I gets the value of 5. Sum gets the value of sum plus I, 10 plus 5, or 15. And now I has gone through all of its values, and at the end, after the loop, we're going to print the value of sum, which is 15. So what we just did was we calculated the running sum, starting a sum at 0, and then adding 1 to that, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. So we end up with 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is 15 as a result. Now another application would be a running product. So very similar to a running sum, except that with a running product you want to start by initializing to 1. So the first time you multiply, you're not changing the initial value. So if we again keep track of what we have, I and prod. So prod is initialized to 1. When I has a value 1, we're doing prod times I, 1 times 1, or 1, and storing that result in prod. So prod is going to be 1. Then I gets the value 2. Prod is going to be prod times I, 1 times 2 is 2. Then I gets the value 3. Prod is going to be prod times I, 2 times 3, or 6. Then I gets the value 4. Prod is going to be prod times I, 6 times 4, or 24. Then I gets the value 5. Prod is going to be 24 times 5, or 120. And now we've gone through the entire loop. We've repeated for every value of I, where I went through from 1 to 5. And then after the loop, we're going to print the value prod, which is 120. This is called factorial. It's written as 5 exclamation point. 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, or we actually calculated it the other way around. 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 is 120. So you can calculate a running sum in a counted loop, and you can also calculate a running product.